This is CBC Vancouver News.
I think it took too long, but I think now everybody's trying to work together.
A full year later, victims of destructive flooding in Abbotsford say there's still a long road to recovery. Also,
we want to work with the Surrey Police Service and not for the RCMP.
the move to keep RCMP in Surrey heats up and hits another roadblock. And
kind of one of the most beautiful places, I think, in the world.
How a beloved BC trail is being rebuilt to be more resilient to climate change. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Michelle Ghoussoub. Dan is away tonight. 1 year later, and the recovery efforts are still going for some hit hard by flooding in Abbotsford. And with the announcement of permanent repairs to help prevent future destruction, Joel Ballard has the criticism tonight that all levels of government have been too slow to react.
It's been a busy year for Erin Parks and her staff after their landscaping business was flooded in the atmospheric river last November.
We were completely wiped out. The building was there, but we were covered in mud and water to about 4 or 5 feet.
Her team was forced to make a decision, lose out on a year of sales or kick it into high gear. They chose the latter. Unwilling to wait around for government support, they cleaned up and moved out, opening a new location away from the heart of the Sumas Prairie.
We kind of felt like we just kept going and we had to do this on our own. And I think a lot of people have felt like that. The government levels, I think it's just taken too long.
Her criticism comes as the province announces key repairs to critical infrastructure in Abbotsford.
Today we're standing at the Sumas River main dike, one of 2 dikes that breached in the Fraser Valley last November and led to floodwaters spilling into the Sumas Prairie and Abbotsford.
Temporary repairs were done, but water continued to leak right through to this fall.
We're very pleased that the City of Abbotsford, with the support of the Samath First Nation, is now moving forward with permanent repairs to the Sumas dike.
At a cost of $1.6 million, it's expected to be completed by the end of the month. The province has also put $41 million towards repairing and restoring other damaged waterways. The news welcomed by Abbotsford's new mayor.
And we know that there is a lot of important work that needs to be done, which is why I'm so pleased with the progress being made here today.
Back at the company, Parks says she's happy to see more government action. She just wishes it had come a little sooner.
This can't happen, right? There's too many, the farmers, the people involved, right? Like the heart of the community, it took a big hit.
Joel Ballard, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Canada's chief public health officer says the country is facing a triple threat of illnesses this winter. Dr. Theresa Tam says COVID-19 cases are on the rise and 2 other respiratory diseases are showing up earlier than usual.
Respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, and influenza have increased above seasonal levels as respiratory virus season gets underway early in Canada.
Tam says the combination of the 3 respiratory illnesses is already driving a surge in hospitalizations. She says children's hospitals are being particularly hard hit by RSV, and more than half of all influenza cases have been detected in children and teens. Tam is urging Canadians to take precautions such as wearing masks indoors and keeping COVID-19 and flu vaccinations up to date. Construction is set to begin on widening Highway 1 between 216th and 264th Streets. BC's Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure says this will help relieve congestion and allow for more sustainable transportation options.
And you can see there is a lot of room for improvement over the current overpass.
The project is valued at $345 million and will increase the height of the Glover Road overpass from 4.3 meters to 5.2 meters to reduce the risk of crashes by oversized vehicles. Construction will also begin on an extra lane to increase capacity and to replace the existing railway crossing east of Glover Road. And moving over to the Sunshine Coast Regional District now, it has extended its state of local emergency because of the shortage of drinking water. The order was first issued on October 17th when drought conditions began. It affects non-essential commercial uses of water, including private swimming pools and hot tubs, non-medical cannabis production, and some concrete cement production, and unfortunately for hockey players, the maintenance of ice at the Sunshine Coast Arena. To Surrey now, where despite new Mayor Brenda Locke's hopes, the majority of Surrey Police Union members say they will not be joining the RCMP if it in fact stays in the city. Locke is trying to follow through on a campaign promise to scrap the transition to a municipal force. But as Jessica Chung explains, even without pushback from officers, experts say her plan won't be easy.
It's a clear message from the majority of Surrey Police Union members.
We want to work with the Surrey Police Service and not for the RCMPs.
94% of municipal police in the city signed a pledge saying they will not join the RCMP should the municipal force be scrapped.
People have come here for the reason of a community-based policing model, something new, something exciting, changing the status quo of policing to really, go into something different and provide what's best for Surrey and not under the RCMP umbrella, but for the Surrey Police umbrella.
Locke is doubling down on her campaign promise to stop the transition to a municipal police force, keeping the Mounties instead. Her hope that the Surrey police members will make the switch to the RCMP is in part because the city needs more officers, and 40 Mounties from the Surrey detachment quit to go to the newly formed SPS.
There's going to be some major problems here. Major problems.
Criminology professor Rob Gordon says there are a number of complications with Locke's plan. One of the biggest is training, as Mounties are trained exclusively at the RCMP depot in Regina.
They're quite used to people transferring in as individuals. The major problem here is the sheer bulk of this group. The last number I heard was 150 actually with boots on the ground. Whether that's higher now, I don't know, but that is a large number of people.
Former RCMP officers transferring back into the force may not face as many obstacles, but Gordon says municipal officers could be looking at a lot of hurdles.
I mean, none of this really touches on the issue of pension transferability, equivalent pay and salary, and all those other things that have to be dealt with.
The union says Locke's plan shows no regard for the will of its members.
If people have come to Surrey Police to be in Surrey and to police in Surrey, they haven't signed up to apply for other police agencies in, let's say, the Lower Mainland or Saskatchewan or wherever they wanted to work. They want to work here in Surrey.
To date, 320 SPS officers have been hired. 154 of those have been deployed on the ground. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Coquitlam First Nation will be building a new sockeye salmon hatchery near the Coquitlam Dam. The nation opposed the construction of the dam in 1914 because it would prevent the natural migration of the sockeye, a crucial natural resource for the Coquitlam, whose name translates to red fish up the river. Just over 100 years later, the nation began negotiations to restore salmon populations.
I'm just a fisherman, but I care. And I walked in a room with 30 other people sitting in a room making decisions on our watershed. And once again, Coquitlam stood in that room and said, you must deal with the historical grievances that you have done to the people.
The Coquitlam Nation is partnering with BC Hydro, the Greater Vancouver Water District, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada to build and maintain the hatchery. It aims to produce 15,000 young salmon per year. BC Ferries is experiencing a number of delays and cancellations between Nanaimo and Vancouver heading into the long weekend. The Queen of Surrey has been taken out of rotation and replaced by the Queen of Oak Bay due to mechanical issues. That means the service is down one ship, and it's not known when those repairs will be done. BC Ferries is encouraging passengers to check the sailing alerts on their website before setting out on your travels. It's also offering complimentary fares for veterans on Remembrance Day. Canada's oldest living citizen is also our oldest living veteran. 111-year-old Reuben Sinclair has lived in Vancouver since he settled here just after returning from the Second World War. We caught up with him today at a special Remembrance Day ceremony at Talmud Torah Elementary School.
I don't think they'd ever understand. I don't think you would if I told you what the war is all about. You have to be there.
In the Air Force, I was training pilots to land and take off in the dark in Europe. My place was stationed at a tower in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. That's a good job. Yeah, I saved a lot of lives. I could help other people.
It's so important for everybody, the kids today, for everybody to know, what everybody did. They are heroes, every single one of them.
I gave up my job and went to the service. I'm proud of myself, how I lived my life.
You can join CBC tomorrow for Remembrance Day when we will honor those who served and continue to serve. Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton will host our coverage from the National War Memorial in Ottawa. You can watch on CBC News Network, CBC Gem, and the CBC News app starting tomorrow at 7 a.m. local time. And here in BC at 6 p.m., Anita Bath will bring you coverage of the ceremonies across this province. Coming up, stunning images from a popular BC trail ripped away by devastating floods last year. How the park is increasing its resilience to climate change. That story's next. Thank you for joining our commercial-free live stream. Fort McMurray RCMP is receiving fewer domestic violence calls this year compared to years past, and experts attribute the drop to pandemic recovery. But as Jamie Malboeuf reports, what hasn't changed is the message that help is available.
Jennifer Legace works for Waypoints, providing assistance for people facing violence. This month, the organization is working to make sure people know what types of violence there are and what resources are available.
Most people are aware of physical violence, but not everyone is aware of the different types of violence that are out there. There's verbal, there's emotional, there's psychological, financial, social. There's so many different types of violences, and people might not realize what is violence and what isn't.
Over the pandemic, the number of calls for domestic violence in Fort McMurray jumped up. In 2021, there were 1,502 calls to the RCMP, but in 2019, there were 1,177 calls. This year is on track to be back around pre-pandemic levels, with just over 1,000 calls so far.
I believe a lot of that has to do with sort of returning to normal after the COVID pandemic. We definitely had some increased numbers in 2020, in the spring of 2020, and 2021 was our largest year over the last 5 years.
November is Family Violence Prevention Month, and the RCMP are highlighting some of the programs and prevention methods available in Fort McMurray. They want to encourage people to pay attention to red flags in relationships and say one tool that is underutilized is Clare's Law, enabling people to get a check on their partner's criminal background to see if they have a violent history. Last year, 3 people used the program, and so far this year, there have been 6.
Perhaps maybe they're, asking to see your cell phone, or they're, wondering where you are. Those kind of red flags that maybe aren't healthy relationship parts, right? So that gives you the option to say, hey, you know what, something's not quite maybe right here, and just ask, does this person possibly have any domestic violence history?
And for anyone experiencing family violence, they're encouraged to reach out and can call Waypoint's Family Crisis Line. Jamie Malbuff, CBC News, Fort McMurray.
Welcome back. We are now taking you to the world-famous Berg Lake Trail in Mount Robson Provincial Park in BC, but very near the Alberta border. It was ruined by extreme flooding after the heat dome last year, a sign of climate change in our own backyard. The park is now being rebuilt, and Rihanna Schmunk traveled there to bring us how this project is acting as a kind of blueprint for other parks across the country on how to survive the effects of climate change.
So we are just heading up now to get in the helicopter to fly up to the Berg Lake Trail, and that's usually something that you would hike in and do and camp for a couple days. But we're flying today because the trail's been closed for well over a year.
It will likely be years before people can see the trail that makes Mount Robson a world-class hiking destination. It's been shut down since a flood in 2021 ripped out entire sections of the path. Park manager Elliot Ingalls knows this area and what happened better than anyone.
So we are basically on the shores of Berg Lake. We're kind of standing in the middle of paradise, I guess. It's kind of one of the most beautiful places, I think, in the world.
Well, now you get a full view of Mount Robson, the highest peak in the Rockies, nearly 13,000 feet high. The tumbling glacier takes form and in a furrowing of crevasses tumbles into Berg Lake. It's like this.
Well, you go across something like this, if the weather switched on you and you got a rainstorm, that'd be gone.
That'd be gone. It sure could.
Half a century later, that prediction came true. It's hard to believe anything could shake Mount Robson's sheer, overwhelming mass. But a few days of extreme heat and floodwater from melting glaciers tore it apart.
We're standing right in the creek. This creek blew out and took out a major piece of infrastructure. Like, there's some old wood over there. Like, that's not from this bridge. There's just debris everywhere through here. When we were up here for those few days, it was about 37 degrees at this elevation, which was just incredibly, incredibly hot for this area. And we were watching the glaciers. It looked like they were sweating. You could see water, visibly seeing water, like pooling off of the glacier. They have a finite lifespan, and we're watching them recede in front of us. And last year especially, the volume of water combined with the hot weather created this major event. And yeah, this area was underwater. This bridge was underwater. It was like nothing I've ever seen in my lifetime working in parks.
The full scale of the damage didn't really become real until we traveled a few kilometers south into a valley near some of the trail's most recognizable waterfalls. It's the place Ingalls remembers some of the worst 48 hours of his career.
How vivid are your memories of those days?
I started up the trail at about 4:30 in the morning, and as soon as I got to the first bridge, I was just like, okay, this is it. 20 tons of rocks covering a bridge that had sat there for 20, 30 years, the river coming up 30 feet. This is unbelievable. This is nature, as much damage as you can see along this trail. This site, Whitehorn, is where we mobilized the helicopter and search and rescue, loading about 30 hikers into the helicopter and flying them down.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I couldn't believe it. When I got called on the radio that morning, we knew it was going to be bad, but we didn't think it was going to be that bad.
Somehow, everyone made it off the mountain safely, but the trail was in bad shape.
If you had to, compare this area to the other parts of the trail that flooded, where did this rank in terms of severity of damage?
So while the flooding was happening, this water would have been well over the top of where we are right now. And now you can see it's kind of dug a deep channel along the edge of where the trail used to be. To me, it's so unbelievable, and it really speaks to the event and how unbelievable nature can be.
This year, crews started repairs with new bridges around Kinney Lake, the lower third of the trail. The work will progress to bigger projects like reinforcing riverbanks and elevating or rerouting trail sections that were wrecked. The work is complicated and time-consuming, to say the least, but it's critical.
Comfortable, a nice height, excellent for having tons of stuff on. I could see families playing cards on there. That is a nice spot. BC Parks knows how vital this is to the community. It's the second oldest park in British Columbia. This trail has had an incredibly long history of people recreating here, and it's just a part of the history of the park. And people will look back on this in another 100 years and say, remember when that happened? Hopefully it's an eye-opener for future generations to look at how we recreate and how we do conservation projects in parks, and it's important. It's a story to tell.
Rihanna Schmunk, CBC News, Mount Robson.
Here is a live shot of Harbour Centre. Johanna will have your full forecast next.
It rises out of the gloom in North Delta like some gigantic prehistoric monster. The twin-towered Anasis Island Bridge, connecting the area with Highway 99. When it's finished next June, the roadway will span 931 meters, making it the longest cable-stayed bridge in the world. It looks for all the world to a layman like an ordinary suspension bridge, but it's not.
Everything is suspended from what, the two main pillars, is that it?
Yes, everything's supported from the towers, and all the cables are individual cables rather than using one large main cable.
110 men have been working on this provincial government project since March of 1984, but it's only in the last few months that it's really started to take shape. Today, they were putting in the permanent anchoring for the south span.
We're essentially tying the bridge down to the first side pier. During the course of the construction, we've been using temporary tie downs to stabilize the bridge. It's a milestone because we've now tied down to a permanent pier. Once we've tied down to this side pier here, we can then carry on erecting the rest of the bridge to the center of the main span.
The cost of this project doesn't rate in the same league with Expo or Northeast Coal, but it will cost $47.5 million to build the bridge. The people who live in this area say it's well worth it. So far, the building of this bridge has gone like a textbook exercise. It's on time. In fact, it's a little ahead of schedule. And so far, no major design problems have come up. When it's finished, it'll be the longest of its type in the world. Bob Gillingham, CBC News on the Anasis Island Bridge.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Join Kitsand journalist Angela Starrett as she uncovers land theft in Canada in the new CBC British Columbia original podcast, Land Back, out November 15th. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Senior meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now for a look at the weather. Joe, another cold one out there today. Can we expect things to warm up at all?
Michelle, I don't think you're the only one wondering when we're going to get out of the deep freeze. And the answer is the slow climb out starts tonight. In fact, for most of Metro Vancouver, we're actually going to stay on the plus side of the freezing mark for the first time in quite some time. And that is because Pacific air is entering the picture, stage left. The Arctic air is still entrenched in through the Kootenays. It's still cold across places like Prince George tonight. And we do have special air quality statements in place, Prince George and down through the Kootenays, because of that sinking air mass around that Arctic high. Fine particulate matter is being locked in at lower levels. Meanwhile, snowfall warning still in place surrounding Terrace. This is as that Pacific front slides in from the west, colliding with what's left of the Arctic air, 10 to 20 centimeters. But look at these temperatures. Now, I didn't say warm, I said warmer, but as we head into the weekend, we are getting close to seasonal across the south coast, might even hit the double digits for places like Port Alberni and Nanaimo. 9 for Vancouver as we head into Saturday. And afternoon highs definitely closer to seasonal across the interior. And we'll continue to see that slow warm up through next week as well. In fact, seasonals is basically our story for next week. And I haven't said seasonal in quite some time when it comes to our weather. So nice to have something moderate. Tracking that system out, you can see all that purple, that's the snow in through inland coastal sections. And then in through Saturday, we get that new high pressure, but it's not an Arctic high, it's a Pacific one, something we're a bit more used to this time of the year. So that'll generally keep us dry and seasonal through most of next week. Now, the one little caveat to our dry and seasonal plan is actually tomorrow morning. As that Pacific air moves in, we may see some wet snow. Already seen it on the radar across Metro Vancouver. Just through our higher elevations, clearing as we head into the afternoon. Slight chance of the showers on Sunday, but otherwise, Michelle, almost no sub-zero temperatures in the long range.
Okay, we'll take it. We'll take it. All right, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And that is your late news for this Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For news anytime, visit our website. That's cbc.ca/BC. And your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Good night.